March 25, 1944. The sky above the Pacific shimmered in a cold, steel blue light, broken only by the distant rumble of ocean waves far below. At 30,000 feet, the clouds were thin and jagged, like shards of frozen glass scattered across the horizon. Inside the cramped cockpit of the Boeing B-29 Superfortress, Major Paul "Tex" Robinson gripped the control yoke, feeling the vibrations of the massive engines hum through his hands. Around him, the crew moved with practiced precision, eyes scanning, radios crackling, fingers adjusting dials on gleaming instrument panels. Below them, the Japanese coastline seemed impossibly far away, a stretch of forested hills and industrial towns that, until now, had felt untouchable. Tex exhaled sharply, sensing the tension even through the hum of the pressurized cabin. He was on one of the first missions of the 21st Bomber Command, flying out of newly captured airfields in India and China, and every man on board understood the stakes. This wasn't just another bombing raid. It was a test of a machine that had already become a legend among Allied circles, the B-29 Superfortress. Far below, Japanese radar stations would have detected the bombers hours earlier, but the fighters, if they dared to intercept, were ill-prepared for what approached. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka, flying a nimble Mitsubishi A6M0 from a nearby airfield, spotted the formation through the morning haze. His wingmen nudged each other with nervous grins, whispering that these lumbering, silver giants were slow, unwieldy, and no match for the agile Zeros they had mastered since the opening months of the war. "They're too big, too slow," one muttered in disbelief, eyes narrowed. "A few bursts from our cannons and they'll fall like stones." The B-29s, meanwhile, maintained a rigid V-shaped formation, their four powerful Wright R-3350 engines roaring in unison. On board, the bombardier, Second Lieutenant Samuel Green, adjusted his Norden bomb sight, watching the horizon carefully as the Japanese coastline grew closer. His palms were sweaty, but his voice remained calm as he called out altitudes and bearings to the pilot. The aircraft vibrated with a mixture of tension and raw mechanical power, each man acutely aware of the fragile thread between life and death. As Tanaka dove from his altitude, his squadron brimming with bravado, the Superfortresses remained eerily steady. Tex felt the familiar thrill of speed as the B-29, heavy and almost ungainly in appearance, held its line with a grace that betrayed its size. From the cockpits below and behind, Japanese pilots opened fire, tracer rounds streaking through the sky, some grazing the fuselage, but doing little more than shaking the massive craft. Inside, the gunners were poised, eyes scanning, fingers on triggers ready to respond. For the first time, Japanese pilots experienced the real shock. This bomber wasn't just another target, it was a fortress in the sky. The defensive guns, remote-controlled, pressurized, and synchronized, responded with a precision that seemed almost impossible. Streams of fire erupted, cutting through the air, forcing the Zeros into sudden evasive maneuvers. A sense of disbelief rippled through the enemy formation. The lumbering giant wasn't falling. From 27,000 feet above the coast, the first bombs dropped. The ground below shuddered as factory roofs crumbled and smoke began to curl toward the sky. Tanaka and his men watched, stunned. This wasn't the slow, fragile bomber they had scoffed at. This was a weapon of strategic annihilation, fast, high-flying, and terrifyingly well-defended. The laughter that had filled their cockpits moments ago died in the thin, cold air of reality. Major Robinson exhaled slowly, sensing the shift in the tide of battle. This was only the beginning. The B-29 wasn't merely a plane. It was the harbinger of a new era in warfare, one in which distance, speed, and firepower could decide the fate of nations before the first bullet was fired. March 25, 1944. On the ground at Atsugi Airfield, near Tokyo, the Japanese High Command gathered in tense deliberation. Reports had come in of the latest American bombing raid, a formation of B-29s reaching the Japanese mainland with near impunity. Staff officers passed along radar readings, photographs from reconnaissance planes, and radio chatter intercepted from the superfortresses. Many of the younger officers were skeptical. How could these slow, enormous bombers with such unwieldy profiles evade interception by the seasoned aces of the Imperial Japanese Navy and Army Air Forces? Captain Tanaka returned from his sortie, his flight jacket streaked with exhaust grime, his face pale with disbelief. Sitting across from his superior, Colonel Masahiro Kuroda, he recounted the experience, the formation, the size, the sheer audacity of the bombers. His voice trembled slightly as he emphasized the defensive firepower of the B-29s. "We were fools," he admitted. "We underestimated them. They are untouchable from above." Kuroda's sharp eyes studied the young pilot. The room was silent except for the clatter of maps and papers. It wasn't simply fear. They were facing a technological leap that had no precedent. Japanese aircraft had dominated the Pacific skies for years with their speed, maneuverability, and daring tactics. Yet here, at altitudes well beyond the operational ceiling of most Japanese fighters, the superfortresses floated like steel ghosts, almost impervious to their guns. Meanwhile, back over the Pacific, the B-29 formation continued eastward. The distant hum of engines echoed in the ears of gunners as they remained vigilant. No further attacks came. The Japanese fighters had been forced to retreat or fall back. Lieutenant Green adjusted the bomb sight again, mentally calculating the next release. Below, smoke curled from the first explosions, black and viscous against the patchwork of rivers, fields, and towns. The eerie silence within the formation was only punctuated by the rhythmic chatter of the radio. As the bombs hit their targets, Japanese civilians and military personnel alike could only watch in terror from below. Factories crumbled, storage depots erupted into flames, train lines were severed. Each impact was a vivid demonstration of Allied capability, precision, and power at an altitude thought untouchable. For the Japanese pilots, the psychological shock was devastating. They had trained to face fighters that swooped and died, not these colossal sky fortresses. Back in the air, the first flight of B-29s turned for home. Tex Robinson peered over the edge of the cockpit, eyes squinting against the sun reflecting off the ocean. "Hard to believe that these things were doubted before they even left the ground," he muttered. His co-pilot Major James Holloway nodded, hands steady on the throttle. "They've never seen anything like this. Not even our older crews in Europe had it this bad." The return flight was quiet, the crew tense, but aware that they had changed the course of the air war. Somewhere over the blue expanse, the bomber formation was a silver thread cutting across the sky, unopposed and untouchable. Back at the Japanese airfields, the scramble orders came too late for interception, but not too late for reflection. The High Command convened emergency meetings to consider new tactics, but it was clear the old strategies of dogfighting and nimble interceptions would not work against these flying fortresses. The B-29 had opened a new chapter of air combat, one where altitude, armor, and overwhelming firepower dictated the rules. For Japanese pilots like Tanaka, the lesson was brutal and immediate. Arrogance could no longer be afforded. The once prized skill of maneuverability now seemed almost irrelevant against this new adversary. The war in the skies above Japan had entered an era defined not just by courage, but technological supremacy, and the Americans were the first to wield it. March 27, 1944. At dawn, the rising sun painted the Japanese coastline in streaks of gold and crimson, but the light brought little warmth to the men scrambling into their Zeros. Captain Hiroshi Kanaka ran his hands over the controls, fingers trembling ever so slightly as he listened to the roar of engines warming up on the tarmac. His squadron had been briefed for another interception mission. Intelligence reported another formation of B-29s approaching, this time larger and carrying heavier payloads. The pilots climbed into the sky with the confidence of seasoned warriors, yet a shadow of doubt lingered. Memories of the last sortie, tracer rounds bouncing harmlessly off the Superfortress's armored fuselages, were fresh. The once familiar tactics of high-speed dives and deflection shooting felt inadequate against the distant hum of these airborne fortresses. Above, the B-29s maintained their disciplined formation. Major Robinson's eyes scanned the horizon, noting the faint glint of approaching Zeros. "We've got company," he muttered into the radio. The gunners shifted in their turrets, eyes following the small black dots that grew larger by the second. The tension inside the bombers was palpable. Every man knew the stakes, yet there was also a sense of calm born from training and confidence in their aircraft's design. The Japanese pilots attempted to close the distance rapidly, diving from higher altitudes to gain speed. But the B-29's operational ceiling and defensive armaments made this approach perilous. Streams of fire erupted from the remote-controlled turrets, cutting the sky with deadly arcs. One Zero exploded in a flash of orange, pieces scattering in a silent, slow-motion ballet that left the others reeling. Tanaka's heart raced as he pulled his Zero into a tight loop, narrowly avoiding a hail of bullets. "They're invincible," he thought, disbelief mixing with fear. Around him, his wingmen experienced similar shocks. Some turned back in panic, while others hesitated, unsure of how to strike without courting certain destruction. The early bravado and laughter that had filled their cockpits in previous days were gone, replaced by a heavy, choking sense of vulnerability. Inside the B-29, the bombardier adjusted the northern bomb sight as the formation approached its target city, Nagoya. Below, factories hummed with industrial activity, completely unaware of the storm descending from above. Green's hand hovered over the release lever. One pull, and tons of high explosives would rain down, reshaping the cityscape in minutes. He exhaled, focusing entirely on the instruments, on the readings, on the precision of this lethal dance. When the bombs fell, the devastation was immediate. Roofs buckled, warehouses ignited, and the ground shook with concussive force. From above, the Superfortress seemed almost untouchable, a silent predator observing the chaos it wrought. Tanaka and the surviving Zeros could do nothing but circle helplessly, witnessing the raw power of Allied strategic bombing. By the time the B-29s turned for home, Japanese morale had plummeted. Pilots who had once mocked the lumbering bombers now whispered amongst themselves, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. The psychological impact was profound. The Americans had shown that they could strike deep into Japanese territory, and no conventional fighter tactics could reliably stop them. At the same time, in the briefing rooms of the 21st Bomber Command, confidence soared. Major Robinson's log would later note the astonishing resilience of the formation and the remarkable psychological effect on the enemy. For the Americans, the B-29 was more than just a weapon. It was proof that innovation and engineering could outpace sheer human skill, redefining the rules of aerial warfare in the Pacific. April 1st, 1944. Over the industrial heartland of central Japan, the B-29s ascended once again into the pale morning sky. The formation stretched like a gleaming silver spear, engines thundering with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Major Robinson peered through the cockpit window, noting the faint haze of city smoke lingering from previous raids. His crew moved like clockwork, each man performing his duty with quiet determination. The mission was clear: deliver destruction with precision and return home safely. Below, radar stations detected the approaching bombers. Alerts went out immediately, and fighter squadrons scrambled. This time, the response was larger, more coordinated. Captain Tanaka led a squadron of 12 Zeros, determined not to let another raid go unchallenged. His eyes, however, betrayed his unease. Experience had taught him the danger. The B-29s were fast, heavily armed, and seemingly impervious at their cruising altitude. Inside the lead B-29, the gunners remained calm, communicating in clipped phrases over intercoms. Sergeant Frank Miller, manning the forward turret, tracked incoming fighters with the precision of a sniper. 3 o'clock high, closing fast, he reported. The defensive fire erupted, bullets tearing through the sky, forcing Japanese Zeros to break formation and retreat. Each failed attack intensified the growing panic among Japanese pilots. They had never faced an adversary that combined altitude, speed, and firepower so effectively. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Green prepared the bomb site for the city below. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing, aware that each payload could change the course of the war. As the first wave of bombs fell, the cityscape below erupted into chaos. Roofs torn apart, industrial plants reduced to smoking ruins, and transport lines severed. The shockwave reverberated even through the high-altitude formation, a testament to the sheer destructive power of the B-29. Tanaka's squadron regrouped, shaken but determined. They attempted a coordinated climb to reach the bombers, but it was too late. The Americans had mastered high-altitude, long-range bombing, and every interception attempt was met with near impossible odds. For the Japanese pilots, morale was cracking. Laughter and confidence had long vanished. They now faced an adversary whose technological edge seemed insurmountable. Back in the American formation, Major Robinson allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. These missions, he knew, were more than just bombing runs. They were demonstrations of capability, tests of a new type of aerial warfare. The psychological impact on the enemy was immense, and each successful sortie only cemented the B-29's reputation as a nearly unstoppable force. By the time the Superfortresses returned to their airfields, Japanese command had begun a desperate reconsideration of their air defense strategies. Fighter tactics had to change, new technologies had to be explored, and perhaps most importantly, pilots had to accept that the war in the skies would never again be fought as it once had been. The B-29 was no longer just an aircraft. It was a symbol of a new era, one where precision, altitude, and firepower dictated the fate of the battle long before a single dogfight could ever begin. April 5, 1944. The sun had barely risen over the Japanese mainland, yet a restless tension gripped every airfield from Tokyo to Nagoya. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka sat in the briefing room, his uniform crisp, but his posture slumped. The daily sorties of B-29 Superfortresses had become a recurring nightmare, and every pilot in the room shared the same unspoken fear. They were now fighting an enemy they could neither outmaneuver nor outgun. Whispers of disbelief filled the room. "They fly higher than our engines can reach," one pilot muttered. "They absorb our fire and keep going," another nodded grimly, pointing at radar charts showing flight paths that seemed to come from nowhere, strike anywhere, and disappear with impunity. The men had begun to understand that their traditional skills, the daring maneuvers, the rapid dives, the dogfighting acumen, were insufficient against these steel behemoths. Tanaka rubbed his face and looked at the younger pilots. "We have fought many battles, but this," his voice trailed off. He could not finish the sentence. It was a truth too stark to put into words. Each encounter with the B-29s had left a trail of casualties, both physical and psychological. Confidence, once the hallmark of the Japanese fighter race, was giving way to doubt, anxiety, and hesitation. Meanwhile, at 28,000 feet above Nagoya, the B-29 formation cut through the dawn like a silver blade. Major Robinson's crew had grown accustomed to the eerie calm before each raid, the taut silence of anticipation, punctuated only by the hum of engines and the occasional crackle of radio chatter. The gunners scanned the skies with trained eyes, fingers poised on triggers, hearts steady yet aware that danger was always present. The mission was routine by their standards, but routine was deadly. Below, bombs fell with precise coordination, each strike a calculated demolition of industrial infrastructure. From the ground, the Japanese could only watch in horror. Factories that once hummed with wartime production were now engulfed in fire. Railway lines, vital for troop and supply movement, lay twisted and destroyed. Back in the cockpit, Tex Robinson allowed himself a moment to absorb the unfolding scene. He thought about the first encounter, about the disbelief in enemy eyes, and realized something profound. The B-29 was not just an aircraft, it was a psychological weapon. It instilled fear, shattered morale, and forced the enemy to confront an uncomfortable truth. They were no longer fighting on equal terms. On the ground, Tanaka and his squadron attempted to regroup, but each sortie brought more evidence of Allied supremacy. Pilots reported near misses, sustained damage, and harrowing escapes from defensive fire that once would have seemed unimaginable. The cumulative effect was draining. Young aces, trained for years in the art of aerial combat, now questioned their tactics, their strategies, and even their role in the war. By nightfall, the psychological toll became undeniable. Officers documented reports of anxiety, fatigue, and hesitation among pilots. The laughter that had greeted the first sightings of the B-29s was gone, replaced by silent dread. Japan's air defense structure, once formidable, now faced the unnerving reality of an opponent who could strike anywhere, anytime, and with near impunity. Major Robinson and his crew returned to their airfield, their mission accomplished, yet leaving an indelible mark not just on the map, but on the minds of those they had faced. The war in the skies had changed irrevocably. The B-29 was not merely a bomber, it was a herald of technological dominance, a force that would reshape both strategy and morale for the remainder of the conflict. April 12, 1944. In the dimly lit hangars of the 21st Bomber Command's forward bases, engineers and crews moved among the massive B-29s, checking engines, recalibrating northern bomb sites, and performing last-minute maintenance on the pressurized cabins that had become a sanctuary at high altitudes. Major Robinson observed the meticulous preparation with quiet pride. Every bolt, every gauge, every turbine represented a triumph of engineering. A machine designed not just to carry bombs, but to dominate the airspace above Japan. Meanwhile, Japanese commanders convened yet another emergency meeting in Tokyo. Intelligence reports painted a stark picture. B-29s were striking deeper into the homeland with increasing regularity, and attempts at interception were proving futile. Captain Tanaka and several of the most experienced pilots were summoned to provide first-hand accounts. Their testimonies, once full of bravado, now carried a weight of reluctant admiration. "They are untouchable above 25,000 feet, Tanaka reported. "We cannot climb fast enough. Our guns cannot reach them, and even if we close in, their defensive fire is lethal. Our tactics are no longer sufficient." His words were met with solemn nods. Across the room, officers pored over maps and charts, desperate for a solution to a threat that seemed almost supernatural in its execution. High above, the B-29s carved their path across the sky with machine-like precision. The roar of the Wright R-3350 engines was a constant reminder of power and reliability. While inside the pressurized cabin, the crew remained remarkably calm. Sergeant Miller adjusted his turret as another group of Zeros attempted an interception. Bullets streaked past the fuselage, a deadly spectacle against the morning sun. Yet the B-29s held their formation, their massive frames absorbing what would have destroyed lesser aircraft. Below, the industrial heart of Japan quivered under the calculated devastation. Factories, refineries, and transport hubs succumbed to precise bombing runs. The bombs fell in patterns designed to cripple production and morale, turning once bustling cities into smoke-choked zones of chaos. Each strike reinforced the reality for Japanese pilots. Speed, maneuverability, and courage alone were no longer enough. The B-29 was a technological revolution, a symbol of Allied dominance that could not be ignored. For the Japanese airmen, the effect was not just tactical, but deeply personal. The once prized skill of dogfighting, the ability to outmaneuver an enemy with agility and daring, had been rendered nearly irrelevant. Pilots like Tanaka were forced to confront a painful truth. The future of aerial warfare was no longer a contest of personal skill alone, but a war of machines, of engineering, and of precision beyond human limits. Back in the air, the B-29 crews sensed their growing psychological advantage. Major Robinson's voice crackled over the radio, calm yet authoritative. Maintain formation, eyes sharp. The mission is precision, not panic. Below them, the enemy scrambled in vain, their confidence eroded by repeated exposure to the bombers' formidable presence. Each successful sortie further demonstrated that Allied air power had reached a level of sophistication Japan could not match with existing technology. As the bombers turned for home, the damage was both visible and invisible. Rooftops and rail lines obliterated, factories reduced to rubble, and a once confident fighter force shaken to its core. The war in the skies over Japan had shifted irreversibly. The B-29 was no longer just a bomber. It was a psychological weapon, a technological marvel, and a testament to the Allies' growing mastery of strategic air warfare. April 18, 1944. Dawn had barely broken over the plains near Osaka when the telltale roar of the B-29s reached the city. Inside the cramped cockpits, Major Robinson and his crew felt the familiar adrenaline surge, not of fear, but of anticipation. The mission was clear: strike hard, strike precise, and return with minimal casualties. Around them, the formation stretched in a near-perfect V, the sunlight glinting off polished aluminum, transforming the bombers into silver phantoms gliding over a sleeping world. On the ground, Japanese radar operators blared the alert, sending fighter squadrons scrambling. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka was airborne within minutes, his heart pounding, hands steady on the controls, yet mind racing with the lessons of previous encounters. His squadron, 12 Zeros deep, climbed desperately to meet the enemy, attempting once again to intercept the lumbering giants at high altitude. As the Zeros approached, the first salvo of B-29 defensive fire erupted. Tracer rounds illuminated the sky like veins of fire, forcing the nimble fighters to dodge and weave at impossible speeds. One Zero spiraled out of control, engulfed in flame, disappearing into the haze below. Tanaka felt his stomach knot as he realized that the bombers' guns were not just defensive. They were precise, coordinated, and deadly. Below, the city awaited. Factories, depots, and transport hubs had long been identified as strategic targets. Lieutenant Green focused on his Norden bomb site, aligning the aircraft with surgical care. He exhaled, steadying his hands, and pressed the release lever. A thunderous roar echoed through the sky as bombs detached from the underbelly of the formation, plummeting toward the city. Moments later, explosions erupted across Osaka, black smoke spiraling skyward, flames consuming industrial complexes, and buildings collapsing in clouds of debris. For Japanese pilots, the impact was devastating. Tanaka and his remaining wingmen circled, helplessly, forced to witness the sheer destructive power raining from above. The psychological toll was immediate. Fear replaced aggression, hesitation replaced initiative. Their tactics, steep dives, deflection shots, and coordinated flanking proved futile against the bombers' height, speed, and defensive firepower. Every sortie had confirmed an inescapable truth: the B-29 was beyond their reach. Inside the B-29, the crew moved with trained precision, unshaken by the chaos below. Tex Robinson monitored the formation, noting the enemy's futile maneuvers and confirming the success of the bombing run. Each impact reinforced a growing confidence, both in the aircraft and in the Allied strategy. This was more than destruction. It was proof of concept. The Superfortress had delivered not only fire, but psychological dominance. By late afternoon, the last bombers turned for home, engines humming in unison like a triumphant symphony. Japanese pilots landed in silence, faces pale, their pride shattered. The reports filed that evening told the story. More than infrastructure had been damaged, the morale of Japan's fighter force was crumbling under the relentless assault from above. Back at the base in India, Robinson logged the mission with a mixture of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. The B-29 had proven its worth yet again, reshaping the battlefield with both technology and fear. The Superfortress was no longer merely a bomber. It was a harbinger of a new kind of war, one where the skies themselves became instruments of total strategic domination. April 20th, 1944. The sun hung low over Japan, casting long shadows across cities still smoldering from the relentless bombing raids. On the ground, the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy scrambled to reassess their defenses. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka sat alone in a small briefing room at Itsugi Airfield, staring at maps marked with dozens of destroyed targets. His hands were steady now, but his mind was heavy with realization. The B-29 was no longer an abstract threat. It was a force of strategic annihilation, one that challenged every assumption about air superiority. Reports from returning pilots told a consistent story. Fighter engagements were increasingly futile, interception at high altitudes nearly impossible, and the defensive fire of the superfortresses lethal beyond anything previously encountered. Younger pilots whispered of fear, older ones of frustration, yet all shared a common sentiment. The days of confidently challenging Allied bombers were over. Tanaka finally broke the silence, addressing the assembly with measured gravity. We are no longer fighting men alone in the sky. We are facing a machine built to dominate, and our current strategies are obsolete. Meanwhile, thousands of feet above the islands, B-29 formations continue to patrol with growing confidence. Major Robinson reviewed the mission debrief with his crew. There was a quiet pride in their precision, discipline, and resilience. The strategic bombing campaign had demonstrated not only the physical destruction of Japan's industrial infrastructure, but also the psychological erosion of its fighter force. Each mission was a calculated step towards shifting the balance of the Pacific War. The impact on Japanese pilots was profound. Confidence, once the backbone of their aerial prowess, was replaced by uncertainty. Even the most skilled aces hesitated, knowing that speed and maneuverability could no longer guarantee survival. In tactical meetings, commanders debated desperate solutions: higher climb performance, experimental aircraft, night interceptions, but every idea was constrained by the stark reality of Allied technological superiority. For the Americans, the B-29 had become more than an aircraft. It was a psychological weapon, a strategic instrument capable of reshaping the very conduct of war. Tex Robinson reflected on the sorties flown, the destructive precision achieved, and the realization that the sky itself had become a domain of dominance. Every mission left a trail not only of physical destruction, but of fear, uncertainty, and respect in the minds of those who had underestimated the superfortress. As dusk settled over the Pacific, the Japanese airfields were quiet but tense, haunted by the echoes of explosions, tracer fire, and the relentless hum of B-29 engines. For Tanaka, Hirota, and countless pilots, the lesson was indelible. The war in the skies had transformed overnight. No longer could skill alone decide the outcome. Now, technological mastery and strategic innovation dictated survival. April 30th, 1944, the early morning mist clung to the hills surrounding the Japanese mainland, but above, the sky was alive with movement. Another formation of B-29 Superfortresses had lifted from bases in China and India, engines throbbing with relentless power. Major Robinson sat in the cockpit, surveying the horizon, noting the faint flicker of enemy radar screens lighting up below. The men in his crew moved with quiet precision. They were no longer novices in this deadly ballet, but seasoned operators of a machine that had already rewritten the rules of war. On the Japanese side, the scramble was almost ritualistic. Captain Tanaka and his dwindling squadron readied their aircraft, fingers tightening around the controls with a mix of fear and grim determination. Intelligence reports had warned of the B-29's capabilities, but facing it in person was a revelation each pilot struggled to reconcile with prior expectations. The Superfortress had become more than a plane. It was an immovable, impervious force that rendered conventional dogfighting tactics nearly useless. As the Zeros ascended to meet the formation, defensive fire from the B-29s erupted with deadly efficiency. Tracer rounds lit the sky, slicing through clouds and forcing Japanese pilots to abandon coordinated attacks. One veteran pilot, Lieutenant Sato, narrowly avoided a stream of bullets that tore through the formation moments before bombs rained down on industrial Osaka. Factories erupted into fire and smoke, infrastructure crumbled, and the psychological impact on both the pilots and civilians below was catastrophic. Inside the lead bomber, Green adjusted the bomb sight, coordinating each release with near-military perfection. The city below became a canvas of fire and devastation, a testament to the combination of strategy and engineering that defined the B-29. Major Robinson felt the familiar mixture of awe and responsibility. The aircraft was more than a weapon. It was a statement of what air power could achieve when combined with meticulous planning and technology that surpassed human expectations. The mission concluded without serious damage to the bombers themselves. The Japanese pilots returned to their bases, their morale shattered, acutely aware of their inability to influence the tide of these raids. Captain Tanaka's report was succinct but telling. We cannot fight them in the air. Their altitude, firepower, and resilience render all our tactics insufficient. Our skill is meaningless against their technology. This reality marked a turning point in aerial warfare. The B-29 had demonstrated that mastery of the skies no longer depended solely on pilot skill, bravery, or maneuverability. Technology, altitude, precision bombing, and coordinated defensive systems had created a paradigm shift. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots was as significant as the physical destruction on the ground. Back at Allied bases, crews debriefed in low voices, reflecting on the magnitude of what had been accomplished. Each mission reinforced the supremacy of the Superfortress and the inevitability of strategic air dominance. The war in the Pacific had entered a new era, one in which the combination of engineering brilliance and tactical discipline could strike fear into the hearts of even the most elite enemy pilots. The stage was set. Japanese pilots had learned, painfully, that the sky belonged to the B-29s. The era of aerial combat defined solely by skill and agility was over. Fire now rained from above, and the world of warfare would never be the same. May 5, 1944. The Pacific sky glimmered with the rising sun, and the hum of B-29 engines reverberated across the newly established forward airfields. Major Robinson and his crew prepared for yet another sortie, but there was a palpable difference this morning. The men had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the missions, the precise calculations, the coordinated formations, the immense responsibility that came with commanding such a powerful aircraft. Yet each time they climbed into the sky, they carried with them the knowledge that their presence alone was reshaping the war. On the Japanese side, the effect was unmistakable. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka, now seasoned by weeks of fruitless engagements, stared at the flight schedules and knew what awaited them. Even with the most daring maneuvers, the Zeros could not reach the bomber's altitude, and every attack attempt was met with near certain destruction. Reports flowed in of damaged infrastructure, disrupted supply lines, and cities left smoldering. A constant reminder that the B-29 was more than a weapon. It was a statement of technological supremacy. In the sky, the B-29s moved with disciplined precision. From 30,000 feet above the Japanese mainland, the ground below looked small, almost fragile. Lieutenant Green's hands moved methodically over the bomb site, and Sergeant Miller kept his gaze on the approaching dots of enemy fighters. Each pilot knew their role, their purpose, and the immense power of the aircraft they commanded. It was not brute force alone that had changed the course of the air war. It was strategy, coordination, and engineering that made each superfortress nearly invulnerable. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots had become cumulative. Fear, once fleeting, had hardened into a constant presence. The laughter and underestimation that greeted the B-29s at first had long vanished. Now, each approach of the massive bombers was met with tension, doubt, and the stark realization that the war in the air had irrevocably changed. Pilots like Tanaka recorded in their logs the unprecedented challenge of facing machines that combined altitude, speed, and devastating firepower in ways that human skill alone could not counter. For Major Robinson and the 21st Bomber Command, the missions were also teaching a profound lesson. The B-29 was more than a bomber. It was the herald of modern strategic air warfare. Its reach, precision, and defensive capabilities were shaping both the physical and psychological battlefields. Every successful mission reinforced the principle that air superiority no longer depended solely on pilot skill. It required technological innovation, meticulous planning, and the will to sustain relentless pressure on the enemy. As the day drew to a close and the bombers returned to their bases, the skies over Japan had been irrevocably altered. Cities lay in ruin, supply lines were disrupted, and the morale of Japanese fighter pilots was in decline. The B-29 Superfortress had not only rained fire from above, it had shattered assumptions, rewritten the rules of engagement, and introduced a new era of aerial dominance. For those who witnessed it firsthand, the lesson was clear. In the Pacific theater, the sky belonged to the Superfortress. And for Japan, the era of fear, awe, and helplessness under relentless aerial assault had only just begun.